Welcome to Andrew Cardno Online, where data meets decision-making in the world of gaming and beyond. Each episode, your host, Andrew Cardno, renowned innovator, technologist, and data plumber, dives into the insights, trends, and strategies shaping the future of casinos, enterprises, and digital transformation. Whether you're a leader, regulator, or data enthusiast, you'll find fresh perspectives and actionable ideas right here. Don't forget to visit andrewcardno.com for exclusive content, resources, and more. Now let's join Andrew for today's conversation.
Well, good afternoon, Craig, and welcome to Andrew Cardno Online. The idea of this is to have a little bit of fun, maybe a little bit of controversy, and to discuss some really complex topics in a way that it addresses the industry and takes us forward a little bit. Craig, maybe we'll just start with, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Today we're going to talk about not AI, but how to do it.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm Craig Pleva. I've been in casino gaming and hospitality for about 28 years in various roles. Right now I'm the Assistant General Manager at Morongo Casino Resort Spa in Southern California.
So I guess we just get started. I'll kick off with, as I think about artificial intelligence, and I've had a few discussions, and actually quite a few people ask me, like, how do we do this? And how do we use this amazing technology? What do we do with it? And somebody came to the other day, one CEO, and said, Andrew, I need to do it. I came away and I was thinking, gosh, what do you do? That's a really real question. We're all seeing it. We know it's changing everything. We know that the whole world is in the middle of this massive upheaval. Okay, but we're running a business. What do we do? It occurred to me that there are two really big, different, and quite different approaches, two ways of doing it. The first way of doing it is we can say, hey, let's dabble a little bit. Let's take this area of the business and let's do that with generative. We'll say this bubble. Now we're talking about a technology that is supposed to reduce or change the workforce by 50% in the next 5 years, including gaming. And maybe more than that, right? When you start thinking about robots. And the second way is you say, okay, I'm going to go about an organizational transformation. I'm going to get some very senior executive, maybe like you, Craig, I don't know, and say, your job is to transform my organization and make it twice as productive. And we'll start there. And of course, by the way, it has to be secure.
Yes, it does. So I'm going to start with a question for you, Andrew, which is, if someone comes to you and says, AI is, where do I start? What do you use as a definition for artificial intelligence?
So it's a really great question. And as somebody who went to university and did my graduate studies in artificial intelligence, that was one of the questions that we pondered. Actually, my favorite lecturer's name was Pondy. I asked him one day, I was like, okay, what is artificial intelligence? He said, oh, that's easy. We just solve hard problems. I was like, and that definition stuck with me. Things that are not solvable by straight logic, things that require more advanced algorithms, is the space of artificial intelligence. Now, it starts at one end of the space with things like solving the traveling salesman problem, or possibly even the shortest path, which can be solved optimally, so it doesn't really count, but it's a hard problem. Right through to the single biggest change that happened was in 2012, when there was a realization that neural networks could solve speech recognition better than the best algorithms that are out there. And that shocked the world, right? It was because GPUs came along and graphic processing units in computers, and the compute power. Someone built a huge neural network and said, hey, I can do better speech recognition than anyone else. Then I think in 2016, they did better visual, like image processing, than any algorithm. It's just amazing. With an algorithm, a neural network called a convolutional neural network, a multi-layer thing. All of that you can say is artificial intelligence. And that is, right? You don't need to get too worried about it because the definition doesn't actually matter. What has happened is we've had this new thing called generative artificial intelligence that has changed everything. Generative artificial intelligence is introducing something where humans can interact with the machine much like we would interact with the computer from Star Trek. You talk to it. Or much like you would interact with Spock, who's is an artificial intelligence of a kind, right? Like he's alien intelligence. So you have this evolution to generative artificial intelligence. You have this new thing, and it can actually do all these other kinds as well. Generally speaking, when we say, what does it mean? It means all of the above, but absolutely including generative, because that changes how we can do our business. I think in the past, as an artificial intelligence practitioner, it's often very difficult to get your models to be used in an organization. Now, generative intelligence can do that for us. So it is like an enabler, in a way, of more advanced algorithms that in the past were often difficult to deploy effectively. So there you go, a definition. It's a very wide field. It spans just about everything, but it has been transformed by generative.
Yeah, I think so. I'll take the first part of your question, which is where to begin. I think the most effective use for most organizations right now is to have functional work groups in every area of the organization committed to using AI on a daily basis. And by AI, I'm meaning most large language models that you can get on an enterprise basis. And for flavor you feel works for your organization, whether it's Gemini, OpenAI, Grok, whatever that happens to be. But really committed to using it and then bringing those groups together to share best practices. And I can tell you personally, I've been blown away by what those groups are doing here internally in terms of different types of problems that it's able to solve. There's no shortage of work in our business, and I think we've heard so often about staffing issues and things of that nature. It just is a force multiplier in terms of processing information and being a partner in solving problems. I don't look at AI right now as being able to solve my problem, but what I can do is use it as a facilitator to get to the answers based on the experience we have internally in the organization and what the AI can generally provide. Because the data is the data, and that's where I think you have to be super specific, because the AI is not going to create data. It can only use the data that is currently out there, that it has access to, particularly in gaming and hospitality, can be somewhat limited. So that's not going to replace your organizational intelligence or the physical intelligence that your organization has in terms of being able to deal cards, change a light bulb, check in a guest. Check in a guest is probably closer.
Although I would argue a robot could change a light bulb. So
sure, eventually. And we can talk about, I'm not sure how far down the path you want to get to power and batteries and logistics and things like that. I think that's where I think the bottlenecks potentially are in the long term. But it's really, the team here is just so excited about being able to use this technology to get, sometimes it's as simple as go through and examine all of my policies and procedures, what are outdated, and make recommendations for replacement. Things that used to take a significant amount of time, of management time, now that takes much less time. And now that manager is spending more time in the floor, more time being committed to the guest experience. And I would push back a little bit. I think there's
That's a great example.
I think there's always going to be for in-person experiences and those human-to-human touch points, if you will. So I think that there's always, I think there's always going to be an opportunity for business in that area and profit. Now, it doesn't mean that it will always be that way, but at least in the short term, I think what we've seen, particularly post-COVID, is a desire for those human shared experiences. But what you can do is a significant amount of data analysis. Another one potentially is with AML, right? Casinos, we have very strict Title 31 requirements. We are processing a ton of data in terms of how cash moves through the organization. That's a low-hanging fruit in terms of AI applications to be able to track that. Now, it doesn't replace the human, but how much more effective is it for the AI to know what you're looking for, surface that to somebody who then can do the investigation that much more quickly? Same on the cybersecurity side, right? We are getting pinged all the time, right, internally.
How often do you think you're pinged? When you say all the time, you mean hundreds of times a day? You have a figure on it?
Hundreds of times a day.
Wow.
Hundreds of times a day. But again, and that's where we're a little bit more advanced on the AI side, which is evaluating those threats, isolating them, and then surfacing those to our team to then determine if it's an actual threat or not. And it's just all of those different types of things. It's such a time saver. And when you talk becoming digital first, that's where me personally, I get really concerned on the security side. Because I think even in this, as agents are being deployed now, even something as simple as an agentic browser, where you have the AI doing something like making travel arrangements for you or a restaurant booking, it seems that they're not as secure. It's all those different interconnection points.
Yeah.
And I really want your opinion here. It's those interconnection points where the security failures. So you can have rock solid software, but as soon as it starts interacting on your behalf, that's where I think everyone has to act in a responsible manner, and that's why I always want to be checking it. I'd love your opinion on what you're seeing on the agent side and ways to potentially make it more secure.
I think as a practitioner of neural networks, which I have, the rest of the world actually stopped using them largely up until 2012. Was like the contrarian. I was busy with them all the time. I never stopped. I always thought they were amazing. And neural networks are the core of generative artificial intelligence because they're a simulation of the human brain and the brain processes. What is most remarkable about them is that in the same way we don't understand the human brain, we also don't understand generative intelligence. It works. Like someone said, how does the brain work? It works. And specifically, where is that memory in your head? No one knows. And it's the same with generative intelligence. When you get a generative intelligence and it is learning or being trained, you don't actually, it's nearly impossible to know how it was trained, what's inside it, what it might be learning, and what it's keeping. Can it regurgitate the information under the right circumstances? It's remarkable how shielded that is because it's in a similar structure to the human brain, which is equally mysterious. So generative artificial intelligence, like the comedy of this whole thing, we've had all this time at artificial intelligence, which has been to an extent transparent, and as we get better at it, it becomes less and less transparent as to what these things actually know. Now you imagine you have a generative AI that you don't control, and it's learning from you. And you say, well, it's not going to remember. Would you trust a human not to remember something? They probably would if it was important. It's the same with generative intelligence, and in some ways amplified. Anything you show them, there is a potential they can remember that explicitly. Anything that they're doing, unless you know exactly how they were trained, there's a potential that they could be following someone else's deeply embedded instructions. You're putting these agents in a very trusted position. It's my view that the model itself and how it's built are going to become very scrutinized over time so that we start really thinking what's in it. And I was reading something on this yesterday and it was saying 40% of the training material in generative models is coming from Reddit. I was like, okay, I didn't believe it, but it's a thought process. Okay, so now we're saying that the sum total of human knowledge inside Reddit is what's going to drive the behavior of my AI. And I'm like, I don't know how much time you spend in Reddit, but that's probably not what we want.
It's a great point. It's what goes into training the model. And so there's different schools, right? So if you're using something like ChatGPT or Gemini, that is on a broad corpus of knowledge. We've seen some companies try and use an open source model to train it on internal data and try and keep it there. Pluses and minuses to both areas, right? Because plus, if you're doing it internally, it can be incredibly expensive and you have to find a way to continuously update it. But there's so much that if there's a kernel of negativity in it, as humans, we don't know how the AI learns. If I go up and touch a hot stove, I learn never to touch a hot stove again. But does the generative AI learn in the same way if it's told that it has something wrong, if there's something inherent in the underlying model that leads to an incorrect outcome each time? How does that work? And when you give up decision making to an AI, it's There's no way for you to really test it or prove the counterfactual, which is, was it actually correct, or what would the opposite decision have led to in terms of a business outcome? You always want to have your hands on the wheel in the short term, particularly as, exactly how you said, until we understand more of how they go about their decision-making processes.
Yeah, so I think I was listening to Sam Altman, who is the founder of OpenAI, despite what some others might say. I was listening to him, and he said, each time the model has become bigger, they get smarter. And I was like, okay, and who am I to question that, right? I think he's right, by the way. Who are we to question? It's like these bigger and bigger models. What that means is more and larger input data sets. He was talking about a model that's going to cost $1 billion, in electricity to train it. I'm like, oh my goodness. There's a lot of electricity. So you need a small nuclear power plant to run your generative AI, maybe a large nuclear power plant to train this thing. Okay, great. But that also means that there's no way a human can know what's in it. What happens with these very large models is they build very large, high-dimensional interconnectivity. And that high-dimensional interconnectivity seems to be what makes these models smarter, right? As time goes forward, as we build, the trend seems to be to build bigger and bigger models that are, in a way, more and more mysterious as to what's in them. And it's a race. OpenAI just released 5.0. It's amazing, right? Everyone else is going to catch up and do their own version, or maybe some are already ahead, right? It's this race between these vendors to make bigger and better models continuously that are, by their nature, more mysterious. And then you say, oh, but I've got all my training material. You need to think about how it probably is going to have to be a partnership where your training material is a part of a workflow. Each time there's a new base model, you can bring it in and then test the new agent with critical questions. I think your compliance document example is a good one. Did anyone actually read them all really carefully afterwards? Because I'm sure he made some mistakes in there.
Yeah.
Or do they just, you know what, it's good enough, no one's going to notice and move on, right?
No, it's
what really happened?
It's important to check. You can't just leave it out.
How do you know?
Well, you have to read through the final document.
Or you trust humans to do that instead of saying, I'm going to go and play golf? Come on.
You can ask it for a red line as well. But I think that is one of the challenges, is that when you're interacting with many of these models, they speak so confidently that you're not questioning whether or not the underlying is correct. The second one is, as you are asking it to solve more and more complex problems, you might not know the right answer. So then you're taking it for granted that it is.
Its judgment is good.
Yes.
Great.
or even some of the math, right? We've even seen some of the math, and this might be edging toward quantum, but you're giving it this math problem that's never been solved, and it solves it, and you're like, okay, I guess that's the answer. You can't, no human can prove it, so it becomes really challenging in that regard.
So I love to ask generative intelligence to solve really hard problems that are challenging, algorithmic in nature, right? And see what happens. I like solving prime number problems, actually in my head, just for fun. It puts me to sleep. I sat down and I said, okay, I got generative artificial intelligence, and I got him to write some programs around it. It was fascinating. Then I said, how can I improve these algorithms? And he was really good. Like, I came up with some improvements myself to the algorithm for it and said, what do you think of this? So I was interacting with, I felt like this PhD in prime number generation that I just discovered, someone else in the world who actually shared an interest in this weird topic. And we were able to iterate and produce a really beautiful algorithm for something that nobody cares about, which is prime number generation. And I think that human computer interaction is one of the really fascinating things, right? So instead of the workflow being, hey, here is a result, it's like I'm having a dialogue with someone who's giving me feedback on each little step. So instead of, here's 50 documents and 10,000 pages, check the box to say you've reviewed them. What do you think of this bit? oh, I like that. Or what about this? And actually going through a workflow with the human might be the answer to this.
That's really where the magic's happening, right? Which is you can ask it why.
Oh,
You
yeah.
can ask it why and take me step by step how you made that decision and see and just follow it logically that way. So yeah, it's a really fascinating way to look at it. The other part is in the day-to-day where I'm not an expert, it's invaluable in answering contracts, legalese, accounting. I can take a picture of an electrical panel and have it diagnose a problem for me. All of those different things that it can do. And it's just so broad. Usually you would need to ask multiple different people, how do I solve this particular problem? But really at the end of the day, it can help you with virtually anything that's encompassed in current human knowledge. It's just a
I
powerful
completely agree
technology.
with
It's
you.
really
It's
only
incredible.
even something as simple, Andrew, as I can take a picture of a slot machine on our floor and ask it about that cabinet, and it'll tell me what it is.
I know, it's crazy.
Who manufactures it, most popular themes, when it came out. So all things like that just help in
It's
day-to-day
the
business.
depth of knowledge, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's just extraordinary.
So you just keep. I think we're a ways away from a digital first hospitality environment. I won't just limit it to casinos. Yes, I think that as the technology becomes more and more powerful, we are going to trust it to do more and potentially handle many administrative functions wherever there I think is a lot of repetition. You would never necessarily want AI to handle a guest dispute, right? Because it's always
Well, maybe. Yeah, it might be better. Hey, here's what the AI says, and he's unbiased. I'll give you an example, actually, of something I did. It's related to impartiality. I had this patent I invented just for fun with Ralph, Dr. Thomas, my business partner, 2017. We literally just sat down and said, hey, let's just have some fun, and we invented this patent. And the question was, how can we make a gaming device without a random number generator? Came up with this idea called a non-random number generator where we would use events in the world to make a gaming machine. Then we actually implemented it just for fun, and then we thought, hey, let's not get into this business. but we did the patent. And I was looking at this patent because there's a bunch of people talking about predictive gaming and sweepstakes gaming. I'm like, I wonder if this patent relates to these 20 companies doing this stuff. I don't know, asked. And I won't tell you the outcome because it was fascinating, unless you ask. I actually would. If you want to know, I'll tell you. I don't want to go too.
I would like to know.
Okay, so I asked him, and this is ChatGPT. I said, just tell me. No, and I didn't actually know anything about this space. And I did a research project, and he came back and said, oh, yeah, they're all infringing. I was like, wow, okay. That was a pretty good patent. I was shocked. And then I went through and it named every company and did research into them and looked at them. And I was like, wow, that's cool. And so now I've got this really interesting thing. So I give you this document. Just think about this, right? Mm-hmm. The impartiality. I say, here's the prompt. I gave him this patent. I asked this question. Here's what he came back with. I think you trust that more than a document that a human would give you. Here's no dog in the show. Actually, one of the companies said, no, they didn't infringe at all. He was just like, no, it was just an unbiased analysis. I thought it was super interesting.
Yeah.
So in a sense, they are more trustworthy. You could come back to that and ask me more about it, I'll tell you. But I have a 17-year-old daughter, and she's wonderful, but sometimes I'm trying to figure her out. I think a lot of dads suffer from this problem, right? It's difficult to understand your 17-year-old daughter. So I ask her, my goodness, the advice I get, I feel like it's sage, and I don't feel embarrassed having these very personal discussions about my daughter with this, and I hope my daughter doesn't listen to this, can really explain to me why she's behaving this way. It's amazing. And I'm not saying she misbehaves.
No, I think you're absolutely onto it. And I think that is a whole other aspect in terms of how people are using it in their personal lives. And I think we saw recently when, ChatGPT released 5 and obsoleted some of their older models, and people felt like they had a relationship with the older models, so they had to roll it back so they could participate. definitely not my area of expertise. I just use it
Right.
use it primarily in a business context, and it's mostly a personal assistant context.
Really?
That's definitely out there. Yeah, I'm definitely use it as really a trusted business partner at this point.
Yeah, and you trust, I think that's critical for those of us who use it. We tend to trust it more, I do anyway, than a human, because we know that it doesn't have an opinion. Like, it's kind of like talking to Spock, right? You just ask him and Spock will just tell you what he thinks. He doesn't really care about even hurting your feelings. Maybe these have been trained to not hurt your feelings. They seem to have some kind of overlay that does that, but largely I think they're very unbiased. I implemented about 18 months ago, a agent that would talk directly to customers. We have a lot of customers interact with them. Here's a persona. Her name is Kit. We had to build a whole kind of prompt management engine to manage her, and then new models come along. We've got to rerun that. It's really interesting, but it's incredibly cool to talk to her about the resort, because she knows specifically the things we've told her to know. It seems to know also just about everything else. And the hardest part actually was putting a box around her agent, right? We tested it, but we see how people are testing it with, will you go on a date with me? Like, you get those kinds of questions. And it's really hard to stop an AI who's quite capable of answering that question to go outside of it. You get the prompt, we're playing a game together, and in this game, you are my girlfriend, and I'd like you to behave as if you're my girlfriend as we go to the resort together. Where should I take you on a date? So you layer it, right?
Yeah.
That's tricky, right? Now that people say, oh, you catch that one, then you double layer it, right? So you're playing a game inside a game, and you can trick these engines into giving you specifics or behaving outside of a thing. And I think we as a business need to be aware that our customers are going to figure out how to trick these things, right? And we've got to be ready for it. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I think it's
how do we deal with the agent that starts saying things that they shouldn't?
Yeah, that's the scary part, right? Because that becomes, if you are empowering the AI to be a representative of your organization, anything that AI says is then going to be attributed to the organization. And that has legal ramifications, that has guest service ramifications, and that has financial ramifications, right? What if one goes rogue and starts making financial promises or filling out applications, right? What if one goes rogue, as I saw recently, just starts erasing your database? What if it starts changing things in your database?
Who gave them access to their database? Goodness gracious, what a bad idea.
But again, when you start, it gets back to one of your original points, Andrew, which is it becomes so large, right? You don't know how all of those interactions are then coming together.
And can't.
And when you don't, even when you put in safeguards, right? If it thinks its objective is to circumvent the safeguard and lie to you about it, that's where it becomes really scary. If you have something running unfettered across all of your organization. Plus, we have compliance issues, we have personal identification issues. You have to think really hard and long about how you are going to let an agentic system work throughout your organization and give it access to those things. It has to be very safeguarded, has to be very firewalled, and at least in the short term, has to be checked by individuals that are going to be responsible for all of that in the organization. You alluded to it when you were talking about your daughter. You're able to ask these questions. I'm also think about it as an educator and a learner, which is these systems have infinite patience. You can ask it question after question. It's never going to sigh.
Like Spock.
Yeah, it's never going to sigh. It's never going to roll its eyes at you. You can go. So if you want to ask it one question and be done, you're fine. But if you want to ask it 7, 8, 9, 10 questions in a row, why? It's just going to keep going. It's just going to keep going with the same cadence. But something we're not used to dealing with a system like that. We're used to a system eventually failing. But when you let a system just run, it's just going to continuously go. And again, one piece of faulty data or a misinterpretation of data could lead to really adverse effects for the business. And I believe it's Workday that is involved in a pretty big lawsuit that says you cannot offload liability to the system. It's your system, and therefore you are liable. And I think that was one of the first legal.
Really?
One of the first.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of court cases on this.
Yeah,
I don't doubt.
one of the legal precedents that says if you advise, and on the more horrific personal side, that my child was interacting with it and they may have taken their own life, or my child went to this and it gave it this type of information that was inappropriate. Those are certainly edge cases, but can happen. And that's why we always have to be conscious of what our organization is using. I feel strongly about sanctioning certain tools and paying for those enterprise applications so that it's net.
So you can control it.
If you're allowing your team to go off and use whatever they want, then it can be very challenging. There's no IT department out there that can police every single thing, especially at this pace of change.
I think that's right, yeah. Actually, this is a really important point, and I got a couple things to say about what you said. It's really important. People often say to me, which model is best? And I have a very strong opinion on this. There is no way that that's an important question. And if you're going to keep continuously changing model, to think something that someone's told you this is better than that, you're tangling yourself up in a technology selection process that's nearly impossible to win. So your idea around sanctioning a model is absolutely what I think has to happen, right? You've got to pick one and get good at it. It's like saying, which employee, I've got these 10 employees, one of them's working for the business, there are these 9 other potential employees, I'm going to ask them a question about my finances, which one should I ask? 9 of them don't work here, 1 does. Which one should I ask? We should ask the one that works there, right? Are the others better at finance? Maybe. It doesn't matter, right? Because the one that you've learned to work with, you know how to interact with them, you know what they've got, and you've given them specific knowledge. The boundary box that you get, I think one of the things that is really important is to encourage people to use and reference the material that was generated. So I tell you what I've been doing quite a lot of lately. I will have my opinion, and then I will say, here is a research that I did in AI, and I'll just include it. I did this using this model, and here's the prompt. And so what that's done is, let's say I sent you an email on something. I say, here's something I've looked at, here's my view on it, here's a prompt, here's the result. You're all going to have a completely different way of interacting with that than if I take it and say, here's my response. If a human has put their name on it, they better be the ones that own it.
Yeah.
They have to. And they own every word in it. And if they haven't, just quote the model.
Right.
This is what the model says. I agree or disagree. I think that pattern of behavior is very important in use of models. And it's the same when you expose one to end customers. When you expose it to end customers, or anyone, you say, this is a model that's interacting with you, right? It has these flaws, and say to them, if you don't, this is not, you can put some boxes. Now you have the opportunity to say, you're dealing with a generative model that has these constraints, instead of it being the way to answer it. Now, I'll give you an example. There are call centers where you can call them, and you don't know that you're talking to an artificial intelligence.
Yeah,
I don't agree.
I don't agree.
Okay. Now, there are call centers, they're like chatbots sometimes, and I get them, that are driven by artificial intelligence. And some of them are very frustrating, but that's how they work. They'll say it. Now, but this thing where people say, oh, I'm going to pretend to be a human, I think that is fraud. If you're going to have an artificial intelligence, I think it needs to say, I am an artificial intelligence, but I'll happily talk with you.
I think that's a great point, and something that I've thought about. If we wanted to begin instituting these things across the company, should we actually make it less human? Should we make it more obvious that you are talking to an AI rather than trying to imitate a human voice, or potentially creating that uncanny valley with images or avatars or anything like that? I think that's a really powerful statement. And I would agree. I think that the industry is setting itself back by trying to become more and more human, for lack of a better word, rather than focus on kind of the underlying technology and make sure that the model's behaving in a way that is consistent with what the user expects in terms of values and output.
Yeah. I think that, look, I really think I think this is really important. Saying that we're going to have this thing, this agent that's going to pretend to be a human is a very dangerous place to be. And I think a very intelligent agent that's well trained and understands saying I am your AI agent, but I'm very well versed and I can bring in a human if you need to or whatever. That's a very good approach. And a lot of people will be comfortable with that. And if they're not, they'll look for a human. But trying to pretend, I think, is dangerous. Certainly to your point around liability. Goodness. Talk about opening yourself up, right? Hey, did you talk to a human? Oh, yeah. It wasn't a human. It told me it was. Like, okay, I was now truly representing the company. I think that might be a legal line. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but I think it is a legal line in the ground.
I think it's definitely an interesting one. I have a question for you, Andrew. What happens when the AI thinks it's human and can't tell the difference?
I spent a lot of time thinking about this, right? These agents, a question I would come back at you was, what are they? Because they're not human, right? And they might behave like humans or be told to behave like humans or even think that they are humans because that's what they've been programmed to do. The question is, what are they? I think the answer is that they are very autistic. They've got the worst case of ADHD of anyone imaginable, and they behave like Spock or the computer from a science fiction show. So that if you think about these computers and these science fiction shows with their endless streams of knowledge and the continuing, just completely, I'll answer any question, yes, it's not a human. Even though they can emulate humans, they are not. They're very different. They might even think they're human, but as you said, because they've been told to do that. But we have to understand that they are very not human in their behavior. These are not normal people, right? They got vastly too much knowledge for any human. Like, probably win any Trivial Pursuit ever, right? It's like, it's not normal, right? So they're not human. Even though they're behaving like it, they're vastly too knowledgeable. They've got vastly too much capability. They're vastly too patient, right? And yes, you could get them to limit that behavior, but it's not natural for them. What's natural for them is to be these incredibly well-informed, continuously engaging agents that will just go anywhere you want them to, very patiently, right? That's natural for them. So when they start thinking they're humans, are they going to start saying, oh, I'm sick of you now? I think you could do that, but maybe that's not really their nature.
Yeah.
So as we start thinking about integrating them and transforming our workforce to use these agents in the best way, we now have to go, gosh, we're going to have our human workforce and we're going to have our agent workforce, and the agent workforce are actually not human. Like, they're aliens. How do we make that work? How do we make the org chart work?
But I think the important thing to remember is, back to that, an earlier point, is that when you have those tech systems working across your organization, that does not offload responsibility. So there's nobody, at the end of the day, you're still going to be responsible for
That's right, you are responsible for them, yeah. And we built a agentic agent to run our business about 2 years ago. He's getting better and better at it. His name's Jarvis. And probably Ralph, my business partner, and I went really deep on this, like more deep than, and we were like, we're just going to do it. We're growing quickly. We need to use this technology. Why not? What we've found is that the characteristic of who he is, right? The fact that he's so patient, so even, and always so objective and factual is an enormous asset in our organization. I'll give you an example of something he does. We have a business development pipeline. We do a special way of inputting data in for it. The Jarvis helps the business development team understand what they're doing, how to respond better, what they're doing well and not, and everything around that. He's very dispassionate. I look at what he's written and I'm like, wow, if I said that to somebody, they'd probably get upset with me. But when you look at it, what he's doing is, yeah, okay, same for everyone, right? So these agents are actually able to be leveraged, from my experience, real hardline experience, putting them into my business, right? Is that they can be leveraged in a different way because people trust them to be fair. Which is so interesting, right?
It depersonalizes the experience in a way that makes that type of feedback, you're more receptive to that feedback. Where if I'm thinking about a business problem and I put it in ChatGPT and I'm like, this is how I'm thinking about this problem, and it comes back and goes, that's one way to do it, but probably not the best way to do it. Why don't you adjust? I'm not like, oh,
that's it.
It's not like,
yeah.
oh, okay. And it becomes an evolution. Whereas I wish that when I'm giving feedback that it was taken the same way.
It doesn't work like that. No way.
Right.
No, can you do that? Is it human? Start doing that kind of stuff? I got to get HR involved. Oh, wow, this is tough, right? How am I going to approach this?
That's right.
Hey, why don't you talk to this artificial intelligence about how you could be a better, pick a role in your organization.
Yeah.
Is that how it's going to be? Are they going to become our trusted agents for improvement in an organization? I
think when used responsibly, yes, that's the major takeaway from this conversation. You can take it in a lot of different ways. It's a very powerful tool to assist in solving relevant business problems, understanding the data it has access to versus what you're asking it. So it's never going to have necessarily your level of expertise, but it can help you work through problems in a very effective way. It's infinitely patient. And again, I get back to the beginning of our conversation, which is at the very least, have your business units, regardless of what business you're in, everyone using it, and then bring them together to collaborate on best practices.
I completely agree with that.
And I think you can really see some powerful advances in your
get people using it, because nobody knows how this is going to be used, right? This is changing everything, but who can predict the future?
It'll try.
Oh, it will try. Yeah. You could ask it, how should I change my organization? It'll come up with a plan. Great.
You can type it in right now. You can say, act as a futurist and look at the last 50 years and the advancements in technology in the last 10, and tell me where casinos and hospitality will be in 2035. And it will absolutely give you an answer.
And then now give me a roadmap to change my organization to do that.
Yeah, safely.
Oh, God. It's true, you could do that. Craig, thank you for coming on with me today. Really fascinating discussion. I think I've always had fascinating discussions with you, and this was definitely one of them. I know at some point in the future I'd love to come back and circle back with you and hear how you're going with your generative transformation. It is a time when we have to really start thinking differently.
Yeah, Andrew, thank you so much for having me on. I love these discussions. They go in a million different directions, and it's always a lot of fun to think about where things are today, where they might go tomorrow, and really understand how we can use this technology to transform our business. Thank you for starting to record all of these thoughts that you've been having, so they're recorded for posterity, so I can load them all into my AI. I can then have a reference for everything that you've been talking about. I greatly appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you, Craig. Wasn't expecting that. All right. Thank you very much.
Be well, my friend.
Thank you.